My affair for money, a confession that haunts me. Chapter 1. The weight of a secret. My name is Luna. I am 24 years old, living in a mid-sized city in an apartment shared with my boyfriend N, who is also 24. By most measures, our life looks ordinary. I go to work at an office downtown, and he's finishing his engineering degree at a local university. We cook simple dinners, watch Netflix, and occasionally argue about who forgot to wash the dishes. Typical young couple stuff, I suppose. Except there's one enormous difference. I cheated on N. It started about 2 months ago. Actually, it lasted about 2 months total, so it ended a few weeks back. Even saying cheated makes me feel physically ill, because I never thought I would become that person. But I did. My motives weren't based on love or attraction for someone else. In a cruel twist, it was mostly for money. That alone makes me hate myself, because it sounds so transactional, so shallow. The man I cheated with is older, wealthy, and offered me financial help. I was desperate for reasons I'll explain soon. So I said yes to something that ended up destroying my sense of self. Now I'm consumed by guilt and shame. I can't sleep, eat, or focus on daily tasks without feeling sick to my stomach. My mind replays the affair, the moments I rationalized it, the times I almost told N but chickened out. He doesn't suspect, as far as I know, but I'm drowning in a sea of self-hatred. The worst part. Ane's ex-girlfriend cheated on him in the past, leaving him traumatized about betrayal. And now I repeated that same betrayal. I'm a living contradiction. I love him, yet I did the one thing that might break him forever. I want to confess. The thought of telling him everything both terrifies and relieves me. On the one hand, the guilt is eroding me daily, making me want to vanish or do something drastic. On the other hand, if I confess, will he survive the heartbreak? Will I ruin him? Because if I keep this secret, am I preserving peace or compounding the lie? This is my dilemma. Chapter 2. How I fell into an affair for money. To understand how I ended up in this twisted situation, you need to know about the financial desperation that gripped me a few months ago. My parents are from a struggling background. My mom has medical bills from a recent surgery, and my dad lost his job. I've been sending them money monthly, but my own salary barely covers rent, groceries, and an occasional date night with N. My credit card debt was creeping higher each month, and the sense of helplessness weighed on me. I considered a second job, but my office hours are unpredictable. I tried selling homemade crafts online, but the income was negligible. Then, out of nowhere, a friend introduced me to a wealthy acquaintance. Call him Adrian, who was known for helping out in exchange for companionship. She implied it could be purely platonic if that's what I wanted. I initially scoffed, horrified that she even suggested it. But the seed was planted. Adrian's name lingered in my mind. He apparently was in his late 30s, successful, and sometimes offered gifts or money to younger women if they kept him company. A few weeks later, a crisis emerged. My mom needed an additional procedure not fully covered by insurance. I couldn't stand the idea of her in pain. One night, after seeing the hospital estimate, I cried in the bathroom, feeling trapped. That's when I texted my friend about Adrian. She told me he was hosting a casual dinner party soon, that I could come. No obligations, she insisted. Just meet him, see if you click. Maybe he'll offer to help you financially. I wrestled with the morality of it. Telling Anne about this plan felt too embarrassing, so I didn't. I rationalized that I'd just talk, maybe get a small loan, pay it back eventually. So I snuck out one evening, told Anne I was working late, and went to meet Adrian. The dinner party was at an upscale apartment with city views, posh furniture. Adrian was charming in a superficial way, complimenting my dress, asking about my background, offering fine wine. By the end of the night, he casually said something like, "If you ever need help, I'm always open to an arrangement." He touched my arm, lingering a moment too long. My cheeks burned, but I thought of my mother's hospital bills. The next day, I tried to dismiss the notion, but an urgent call from my father about a new bill left me reeling. I texted Adrian with trembling hands, asking if we could discuss the arrangement. I told myself it would be purely dinners, conversation, maybe a bit flirty. However, reality had other plans. We met at a cafe, and he spelled out the terms elegantly but unmistakably. He wanted physical intimacy, not just conversation, in return for a monthly help. I remember the sinking feeling in my stomach, a voice screaming, "Don't do it." But desperation overcame me. My heart hammered as I nodded, feeling like I was signing a deal with the devil. He transferred me money that night. I stared at my bank account, tears streaming, both relieved to pay the hospital and horrified at the cost to my integrity. That's how it began. I told Anne more lies, some about late shifts, others about friends in crisis. Adrian and I met discreetly in hotels. The first time we had sex, I sobbed afterward in the bathroom, wanting to claw my skin off. Adrian, for his part, seemed unbothered, texting me, "Thank you, gorgeous," as if we were in some casual fling. But to me, it was a betrayal of everything I believed in. Chapter 3, my life with N before the affair N, and I met in college when we were both 20. Our bond was instant. We shared a love for hiking, science fiction, and Raymond. As we grew closer, we discovered we had similar values about loyalty, kindness, and building a stable future. Over time, we moved in together in a small but cozy apartment downtown. He's finishing up his engineering degree while working part-time at a tech startup. I landed an office job. We'd talk about eventually upgrading to a bigger place. Once we both were financially stable, N's ex cheated on him a year before we met. He told me that heartbreak left him depressed for months, and he needed therapy to trust again. I remember promising him I'd never hurt him like that. But now, ironically, I'd done exactly that, if not worse. My stomach clenches remembering how he once confided in me about his nightmares. He'd dream of walking in on his ex with another man. He said the betrayal was the worst pain he ever experienced. And I looked him in the eyes, swore, "I'm not kind of person." The guilt crushes me to think I became the one who'd prove his nightmares right. We have so many good memories. Weekend hikes in the state park, binge, watching entire anime series, cooking experiments that ended in laughter. My mother adores him, calling him the sweetest soul door. He texts me random memes in the middle of the day that never fail to make me smile. Our fights are usually about petty stuff, like how he leaves socks on the floor or how I'm always late to events. We never had a major trust issue. Until now, he believes wholeheartedly that I'm loyal. So, the knowledge that he's sleeping beside me each night, oblivious to my betrayal, erodes me from within. I see him stirring in the morning, giving me a warm smile, saying, "Good morning, love." And I want to burst into tears or scream. I messed up, but I bury it. Every day, burying it gets harder. Chapter 4, the affair's progression, and my guilt. The arrangement with Adrian lasted around 2 months. At first, it was intermittent. I'd meet him maybe once every 2 weeks. He'd text me, "Need your company?" I'd scramble for an excuse to Anne. Each meeting left me feeling hollow. The second or third time we had sex, I tried to mentally check out, imagining I was doing it for my family's sake. The money came in lumps, enough to cover my mother's bills, my father's groceries, and a chunk of my credit card. Adrian, noticing my reluctance, once asked if I wanted to bail. But I was in too deep, both financially and with the twisted sense of duty that I owed him. So I kept going, hating every second. My mental health deteriorated. I avoided looking at myself in the mirror. My appetite vanished. The only solace was ironically hugging Yen, feeling a fleeting sense of comfort, though overshadowed by the knowledge I was living a lie. My nightmares grew frequent, dreaming of Yen discovering me in a hotel bed with Adrian. I'd wake up breathless, heart racing, glancing at Anne's sleeping form next to me. Some nights, I'd slip out to the living room and sob silently. The last time I saw Adrian was about a month ago. He texted me, wanting to meet at an upscale restaurant, then a hotel. Something in me snapped. The idea of lying again, faking affection, made me physically ill. I cancelled, telling him I couldn't do it anymore. He tried to negotiate, raising the money he'd offer, but I said no. He was polite, not pushy, simply parted with a take care. That was it. The affair ended, but the repercussions linger. In the weeks since, my conscience has been on fire. I see Anne's bright eyes and feel a stab of shame. I can't sleep, can't concentrate at work. The thought that I essentially sold my fidelity for money weighs on me like a stone. My mother's health is better, ironically thanks to the funds I provided. But she has no idea where I got the money, and I can't explain it. Sometimes I resent her for the financial burden, but mostly I resent myself for the choice I made. I keep imagining telling Yen everything, but I freeze. I imagine his heartbreak, his tears, or worse, his numb acceptance. Would he forgive me? Chapter 5, the build up to confession or silence. Now, every morning, I stare at the bathroom mirror, telling myself, we should tell him today. Then I see the fear in my own eyes and falter. I recall how deeply he was hurt by his ex's betrayal. He told me once, can't go through that heartbreak again. I might shut down entirely. The memory terrifies me. If I break him again, can I live with that? But the alternative is letting him live with a lie. That's also cruel. Each time he says, I trust you, baby. My stomach twists. He trusts me to never cheat. Yet I already did. My fiancé Daniel, ironically, is my imaginary moral guide in my mind. I ask, what would he do if the roles were reversed? I suspect he'd want honesty. But do I have the strength? One day, I tried calling a friend for advice. A long-time girlfriend who's known me since high school. I told her a censored version, saying I got involved with someone else for money, ended it, and now guilt is killing me. She was horrified but told me. Telling him might destroy him, but not telling him might destroy you? Which is worse? That question haunts me. My nightmares intensify. Some nights I dream of me at an altar with Yen, the officiant asking, do you vow to remain honest? And I break down, screaming, cheated. In the dream, Yen vanishes into darkness. I jolt awake, sweating. We still function as a couple, ironically. We cook dinners, watch shows. But I'm distant, lost in thought. He notices, asking if I'm okay. I lie, saying I'm just stressed at work, or that I have insomnia. He tries to cuddle me. I stiffen, guilt flooding me. He's worried about me, sweetly offering to pick up my favorite chocolate or draw me a bath. Each kindness is a dagger in my chest. I keep repeating, I have to fix this. Chapter 6, near confession. But my fear stops me. A week ago, I nearly told him. We were sitting in our living room, a quiet Saturday morning. He was sipping tea, reading an article on his laptop. I mustered the courage to say, Jan, there's something I need to share. My voice trembled. He glanced up, concern on his face. What's wrong, Luna? I opened my mouth, but my throat dried up. I pictured him hearing the word, half air. imagining his expression turning from confusion to horror, betrayal, heartbreak. I pictured him storming out, or worse, quietly sobbing. The fear overwhelmed me. So I half lied. I have financial troubles, some I took on for my family. He nodded sympathetically, hugging me. I chickened out, leaving the real issue unspoken. That day, I spent hours crying in the shower, calling myself a coward. Because if I'm too scared to own up, does that mean I place my comfort over his right to truth? Possibly yes. I hate that about myself. But heartbreak can be so destructive. I recall how depressed he was after his ex cheated, how he said he felt worthless. Would I do that to him again? In moments of desperation, I fantasize about punishing myself. My guilt is so intense I've considered self-harm. That's how toxic this secret has become, like a cancer eating at me. I know I must do something soon. If I remain silent, I might unravel entirely. If I confess, I might ruin him and our relationship. It feels like a lose-lose scenario. Chapter 7 Backstory. My family's financial crisis. To fully grasp my desperation, it helps to detail my family's plight. My parents live in a small rural town, scraping by on minimal income. My father was laid off from a factory job last year, and my mother's illness demands frequent hospital visits. She's diabetic, dealing with kidney complications. Their insurance coverage is poor, and bills stacked up. My younger sister is still in school, so no help there. As the eldest, I felt obligated to step in. I tried everything. GoFund, small loans from friends. But it was never enough. My parents never asked me to do anything unethical, but they did accept my money without questioning how I got it. Maybe they assumed I saved. They rarely asked if I was draining my own life. I remember phone calls with my mother, her voice shaky with gratitude when I'd send a chunk of money. "God bless you, sweetheart," she'd say. I'd choke back tears, hating the lie behind my resources. When I told my father I'd not be able to send more next month, he panicked, saying they'd face eviction. That's when I caved. My fear of them losing their home overshadowed my moral compass. I found Adrian's coffer. A quick fix, but now, seeing the aftermath, I realize no sum is worth the internal torment. It's a lesson I learned too late. Chapter 8, A Bump in the Road. Adrian resurfaces 3 weeks after ending the affair. I got a text from Adrian. All good. Need more funds. My heart seized. I blocked his number immediately, but the reminder that I once entangled with him shook me. If I told Ian about Adrian, I'd have to detail how I used my body for money. The shame is immense. It's not even that I fell for someone else romantically. It was purely transactional, which might hurt Ian even more in a twisted sense. I sat on the couch, phone in hand, tears sliding down my cheeks. My Fauci Daniel was out running errands. I cursed the day I met Adrian. Then I cursed myself for not telling Ian sooner. The presence of Adrian's text threatened me, like a ghost from my immoral past. I spent the evening in a sort of trance, ignoring calls from my mother, ignoring everything. Chapter 9, My Emotional Overload. Eventually, I started missing work more often, calling in sick due to insomnia or panic attacks. My supervisor noticed, asked if everything was okay. I feigned a personal crisis, which was ironically true. Meanwhile, my fiancé grew worried about me. "Luna, is something else going on? Are you depressed?" I'd nod vaguely, refusing to elaborate. He suggested therapy. I said I'd think about it. Deep inside, I realized I was inching toward a breakdown. The betrayal, the secrecy, the sense that I was living a double life. Even though the affair ended, its ramifications strangled me daily. I couldn't imagine Ian's reaction if he found out from someone else. That would be an even bigger blow, so my mind circled back to the idea that I must confess to him directly, on my terms, before it's too late. One evening, I typed a confession letter on my phone's notes app, detailing everything: the financial desperation, the approach from Adrian, the times I lied to N. I poured out my remorse, but I couldn't bring myself to show him. The letter just sat there, a digital testament to my guilt. Reading it made me cry. I typed and retyped the lines, imagining how he'd read them. The final line read, "I love you, but I betrayed you. I'm so sorry." Over and over, I changed the phrasing, but never sent it. Chapter 10, The Breaking Point. A fateful morning, one morning, after another sleepless night, I awakened to find N making breakfast in our tiny kitchen. He looked so peaceful, flipping pancakes, humming a random tune. My chest ached. I realized I couldn't continue lying. My mental state was on the edge, and he deserved the truth, no matter how it shattered him. I approached him, voice quivering. "We need to talk. Please, can we skip work today?" He looked startled but nodded, seeing the seriousness in my eyes. We sat at our small kitchen table, the pancakes growing cold. He reached for my hand. "You're scaring me," he whispered. "What's going on?" Tears flowed. I told him I'd done something horrible, that I'd been unfaithful. He turned pale, breath catching, but he squeezed my hand gently, as if bracing for a storm. I started from the beginning. My parents' medical bills, the friend who mentioned Adrian, the hush-hush arrangement, how it began with the best, though misguided intentions. The times I snuck away under false pretenses, the nights I came home with guilt etched on my face. Anne's eyes filled with tears, his grip on my hand slackening. I sensed his heartbreak, saw his shoulders tremble. He didn't speak, just let me talk. I explained how I ended it weeks ago, but the guilt was killing me. I apologized repeatedly, sobbing, feeling unworthy of his gaze. He pulled away, staring at the wall. I saw the devastation in his expression, like he was reliving the trauma from his ex's cheating. My stomach twisted with remorse. We sat in silence for what felt like eternity. Finally, he asked quietly, "Was it just once?" I told him no, it lasted about 2 months. He closed his eyes, tears slipping down his cheeks, then voice cracking, he said, "Why? Why not come to me, ask me for help, or find another solution? Why betray me, especially knowing my history?" I had no good answer except, he was desperate, I was stupid, I was afraid. My words sounded hollow, insufficient. He wiped his tears, stood up, pacing the living room. He looked at me with heartbreak and anger. "You can't believe this. You, of all people, I trusted you more than anyone." I wanted to run to him, but a part of me felt unworthy of even touching him. "Eventually," he said, "I need time." Then he walked out the door, leaving me alone with the cold pancakes and the shards of our relationship scattered at my feet. Chapter 11, Aftermath of Confession. Our world shattered. I spent the rest of that day in bed, crying. My phone remained silent. No messages from Jan. My fiancé Daniel was travelling for work that day, ironically, so I had no immediate comfort. Yes, I realize fiancé and boyfriend might sound contradictory, but we'd used the term fiancé more as a promise ring scenario, not an official engagement yet. We were planning a future. Now that future was uncertain. I was the cause of it all. As the hours dragged on, I realized I had effectively set a bomb off in our home. I didn't blame him if he never returned, but part of me still hoped we could talk it through. My guilt soared anew as I realized I'd inflicted the same heartbreak his ex had inflicted on him, possibly worse. That knowledge nearly made me physically ill. Late that night, he texted me, "Staying at a friend's, need space. Don't contact me." My heartbreak intensified. I typed out a dozen replies but deleted them all. He asked for space, so I owed him that. My mind raced with fear that he might do something drastic, recalling his old depression after his ex. But I had no right to intrude now. Chapter 12, telling my parents, seeking support the next day. I decided I needed moral support, so I confided in my mother about what I'd done. She was stunned, having had no clue how I got the money. She wept, apologizing for the financial burden that drove me to such extremes. I assured her it was my choice, that she wasn't to blame for me crossing a moral line. She tried to comfort me, telling me to pray, to hope Anne might eventually forgive. But even she sounded uncertain, saying, "Cheating's a deep wound. If he can't handle it, that's understandable." The truth felt like a punch to the gut. My father was more stoic, eventually telling me, "You made a grave mistake. All you can do is face the consequences." Hard words, but likely correct. Meanwhile, I dreaded returning to the apartment. I half expected Ian might come to pack his things. Or maybe he'd come for a furious confrontation. But he didn't show. My nights turned into lonely vigils, waiting, hoping for a text that never came. Chapter 13, the tenuous path of possible reconciliation. One afternoon, after about a week of silence, Anne texted May, "We should talk. Tomorrow, 3 p.m. at the park near campus." My heart pounded. Could this be a sign he might attempt to work through it, or was it a final farewell? I arrived at the park early, sitting on a bench by the pond. The autumn wind rustled leaves, matching my turbulent emotions. He appeared, looking tired, eyes puffy. We exchanged a brief nod. Then he began, "He can't just forget this. I feel betrayed in ways I can't describe, but I also can't switch off how I love you." Tears sprang to my eyes. He continued, "Part of me wants to vanish from your life. Another part wonders if we can salvage us, if you truly regret it." I poured out my remorse, explaining how I ended the affair as soon as I could, how I never loved that man, how it was purely for money, how I can't sleep from guilt. Anne listened, silent, tears rolling. Then he asked, "Do you still see him? Contact him?" I shook my head vigorously. "No, I blocked him." He nodded, processing. We talked for over an hour, both crying at times. He asked tough questions about the affair's details. I answered as honestly as I could, each answer twisting the knife deeper in him. "In the end," he said, "I'm not sure if I can get past this, but I might try therapy or something if you do the same." My chest flooded with relief. A chance. Not a guarantee, but a glimmer of hope. I agreed, willing to do anything to regain his trust. Chapter 14, navigating therapy and lingering shadows. Over the next few weeks, we entered a fragile phase. We started couples therapy with a counselor specialized in infidelity. The counselor guided us in discussing the motivations behind my betrayal, the financial desperation, the emotional toll. She helped Ian voice his anger and heartbreak, taught him coping strategies. Meanwhile, I faced my self-loathing, exploring how I let desperation override my values, and how I can never let that happen again. It wasn't a smooth path. Some sessions ended with N storming out in tears, me alone on the couch, feeling I'd lost him. Other sessions ended with him hugging me, whispering that he'd try to forgive. The counselor emphasized that trust might not fully rebuild, but if we both commit to honesty and transparency, there's a chance. I gave Ian full access to my phone, my finances, wanting to prove I had no more secrets. He occasionally scrolled through my messages, asked about random transactions. I answered with raw honesty. Outside therapy, we tried to find shards of normalcy. Watching a silly TV show, cooking dinner. Sometimes an old habit or inside joke made us both laugh, reminding us why we once fell in love. Then the memory of the affair would stab him, and he'd withdraw again. We lived in a cycle of hope and despair. Chapter 15, a new beginning. Or an end. Months have passed since that day I confessed. Our story remains unresolved, in a sense, because rebuilding trust is an ongoing process. But we're trying. N hasn't told me he loves me again. Not yet. He says he needs to see consistent change, needs time to process. I accept that. I see the pain in his eyes whenever the subject resurfaces, but I also see flickers of the warmth we once shared. My Funky Daniel. Well, let's just say the wedding talk is on indefinite hold. We might still get married eventually, or we might realize we can't salvage everything. But we are still living together for now. Continuing therapy. My parents are relieved I didn't spiral into depression. They still worry about my finances, but I'm budgeting better. No more illusions of easy money. Adrian, he remains blocked, a distant memory of a horrible choice. At night, I sometimes dream of N proposing in a field of sunflowers, me tearfully saying yes. Then I wake up, and reality is more complicated. But at least I face the day without the same crushing guilt. Telling him was the hardest step, yet it gave me a fighting chance at redemption. If we fail, at least it's honest failure, not built on lies. I'm no longer wanting to end my life. The guilt is still there, but I manage it by working on self-forgiveness. The counselor helps me see I'm more than my worst mistake. She says, you recognized your wrongdoing, ended it, and confessed. That's a start. I hold on to that hope. So I stand at the edge of an uncertain future. Will Yan fully forgive me, or will the scar remain too deep? I can't say. But I know I love him, and I'm prepared to do whatever it takes to heal. If he decides he can't move forward, I'll respect it. I'll grieve but understand it as the price for my betrayal. If he does let us continue, I vow never to repeat that mistake or break his trust again. That's our story. From a naive young woman grappling with financial desperation to a secret affair that ended in heartbreak. From a silent guilt that nearly destroyed me to a confession that might open a door to redemption. We're walking this road together, uncertain but honest at last, and in that honesty lies my faint hope that love, battered but not dead, can still bloom.